The United States and the collective West, its vassals in the collective West, believe themselves to be the arbiters and the dictators of all world affairs. They believe themselves through this Ukraine conflict, through this, unhinged neocon foreign policy establishment, wrecking ball that they are throwing around the globe, destroying country after country. They think that they control everything. And Russia and China, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin said, no, you actually don't. The opposite is true. The empire is burning and it is falling. And we are not going to sit on the ashes and wait for the world to burn. We are going to chart a course forward now, and we're going to do it with utmost care, with utmost sincerity, and with utmost leadership. Real leadership that takes into account the interests of not just each other, but also what is best for this planet. And that is really hard for a lot of people to believe. So I'm going to play now a Duran video because I think the Duran really did summarize the significance of this meeting very well. They summed it up very, very well. So I'm going to react to it. We're going to listen to about 7 or 8 minutes, I believe it is, of this video. Okay, with the Duran. So here it is. Let me share it up here now. All right, because Alexander Mercouris is now going to talk about sort of the environment surrounding the meeting and then, some of the things that have already happened out of it. So here we go.
Xi Jinping was received with all the splendor and pomp that the Kremlin can put on at Vnukovo Airport, which is, the major airport where heads of state are received. There's been articles by Putin in the People's Daily. Xi Jinping himself responded with a long article in Russia Gazeta, which is the official Russian newspaper. It's been republished by RIA Novosti, which is, of course, a branch of, Russia's news media. So these articles don't actually tell us very much about anything, but they are intended to show the extent to which the two leaders have identical views on global problems. Anyway, there's going to be a huge meeting. And of course, most international media commentary has been discussing Ukraine and about what Xi Jinping might be up to with respect to Ukraine. I think this completely misses the point of the meeting. I think this is, obviously, they're going to talk about Ukraine, and the Chinese are going to float their various peace proposals over Ukraine. I don't think they have any expectation that this is going to result in any kind of peace in Ukraine. The purpose of this meeting, and it's the first foreign visit, that Xi Jinping has made since he was re-elected China's leader just a few days ago. The purpose of this meeting is both to demonstrate to the world the depth and strength of the Chinese-Russian friendship and to deepen it further. And it's the last which is perhaps the most important, because we're going to have a swathe of economic agreements. We're going to have agreements on energy cooperation. We're going to have agreements on technology cooperation. We're going to have agreements on finance. But above all and beyond all of that, we are now getting the first real hints that this friendship between China and Russia is now beginning to acquire a military and security dimension as well. And there was a very, very interesting editorial in Global Times, which is, of course, the English language newspaper run by the People's Daily, same newspaper that Putin published his article. Anyway, Global Times editorial, which says that this is now a friendship that is not going to tolerate interference or meddling by any third parties and coercion by any third parties. By third party, read the United States. And when they talk about coercion, it's a clear hint that there's a military aspect to this relationship, which officially there has not been up to this point. So I don't think we're going to see an announcement of a full-fledged military alliance, But I think we're going to start to see this friendship going to take a whole series of further steps towards in that kind of direction.
So, I mean, he's not wrong here. That there was definitely military cooperation discussed. You know what's so interesting though is that this meeting was framed as simply about Ukraine. However, it really was more about these two countries showing that they are actually strong enough to meet this moment independently of the United States and the collective West. That's what really this meeting was about. And we're going to go over soon all the things that came out of it. But indeed, you know, this was about much more than Ukraine. And it was really a political statement. It was really a statement that the United States and the collective West are a thing of the past. I truly do believe that the way that Russia and China conducted this meeting, that's the message that they were sending, and rightfully so, because to be honest, they don't even have to state that. They don't have to make that a part of their propaganda. One thing that was so interesting that Alexander Mercouris brought up here, and it's true, the content of the articles are not very deep, but Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping cross-published in each other's respective medias, lengthy articles talking about just how deep and warm this relationship is and what the significance of this meeting is. That generally doesn't happen. Usually in bilateral meetings, only one leader, the one that is visiting the other country, right, the other world leader, they might write an article in the media. For example, Vladimir Putin back many years ago wrote, I think it was 2013, wrote an article in the Washington Post talking about his visit to the United States. I think it was maybe it was 2012, but he did do that. But Barack Obama, of course, did not write an article in Russian media. You would never catch a U.S. politician writing articles in other countries' media, especially adversaries. But nonetheless, it's significant in the sense that they are sending a message of how deep the bond really is. Let's continue.
We're not there yet, but I think that's where we're heading.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk from the collective West media, and even a statement from the State Department's Kirby that any agreement in and around Ukraine is not going to be accepted by the United States. And the collective West is focusing on some sort of peace agreement being worked out, or some sort of roadmap being worked out in Moscow. And Kirby, I think Kirby even said that they're trying to get Xi Jinping to speak with Zelensky after he meets with Putin. So they're placing all the focus of this meeting on Ukraine. But I actually think that that's exactly what Xi Jinping and Putin want the collective West to do. I think they want Kirby to come out with statements like this, where he says, if there's any type of a roadmap to peace that's worked out between Russia and China, the U.S. won't accept it, because I think the two leaders would like the U.S. to come out with statements saying peace is unacceptable. And then they can take those statements from the U.S. and they can pass them on to the multipolar world. And in the meantime, you have China and Russia coming out with statements saying that together they're going to stand guard over international law. That's a statement that Xi Jinping made. Together they're going to stand guard over international law. In other words, the U.S. is now the party. They're kind of flipping the script a bit. The U.S. is the party that doesn't want any peace in Ukraine, and come to us and we'll look over the peace and security and the international order of the rest of the world, really. So I think they're playing the U.S. here. The U.S., it seems like the Biden White House fell for it. They should have just not made any statement with regards to Ukraine. I don't know why they came out with a statement saying that any peace is unacceptable. I don't know why they feel an urge to say stuff like that. Even though I agree with you, I think Ukraine they're going to talk about it, but I don't think it's the main big agenda item.
Yeah, you're completely right. You're absolutely correct in what you said. I mean, it's not difficult to work this out, because if you listen to what the Russians or the Chinese are saying, the Chinese have even said as much. They said, look, We haven't actually come up with a peace plan. We've just given some outline ideas.
That's a key point too, because it was a peace proposal. It was what could be done, right? China, at the 1-year anniversary of the Ukraine conflict, said, here are 12 points of a framework from which peace could be worked out. China was never saying, and this is how the collective West likes to spin things, China was never saying, Russia, this is what you should do. This is what all parties should do. No, China was saying that this is how we can get to the path toward a peace plan, right? These are the necessary components that we'll need to get there. It truly was an act of diplomacy in an attempt to position oneself, and China is in a really good position to do this, as a mediator of peace for a future peace, not for a peace that should be declared now. Although, of course, China and Russia as well has been very genuine about this, would have taken some kind of peace plan a long time ago. If you remember, in April, it was the United States and the UK and the collective West that was the one who essentially destroyed any possibility of a peace plan when one was just about to be brokered. So let's continue.
About what we think the general, contours of what might be a peace plan might be. That was all that Chinese position paper was all about. They're not setting themselves up as mediators. They say if people want us to be mediators, well, we're not going to say no. But they've not come up with any peace proposals. They've not really suggested that they're in a position to achieve peace in Ukraine. And yet, the mere hint that there might be some kind of Chinese peace initiative provokes from the Americans, from the administration. And we want to stress always the administration, not all Americans, the administration. There's immediate reaction. We're not interested in any Chinese peace proposals, none at all. This isn't the way to peace. And of course, it's exactly what you said. The Chinese, especially the Chinese, are now able to go around the world and say to the world, look, we are not causing the conflict in Ukraine. Our friends, the Russians, are not causing conflict in Ukraine. It's all the United States. We're coming forward with ideas about how peace could be achieved in Ukraine. And what does the United States do? It shoots them all down. It doesn't want peace. It wants the war to be prolonged. The US says that, we are supplying weapons to the Russians. We're not supplying weapons to the Russians. It's the Americans that are supplying weapons to Ukraine. It's the Americans here who are the belligerent party. It's so obvious. It was such an obvious trap that it's incredible that the administration fell right into it.
So that's where I wanted to stop, because let me just stop the screen here. That's where I wanted to stop, because this is such an important point, okay? This was such a smart move diplomatically to time this meeting just after the 1-year anniversary of the Ukraine conflict and just after Saudi Arabia and Iran brokered peace in Beijing, just after China released this peace proposal, and just after Russia has gained a lot of momentum in the conflict. It was really genius diplomacy, because what Alexander Mercouris said there, I mean, it is a trap. I don't necessarily think that China and Russia were setting a trap. They don't have to set a trap. There's no trap that has to be set, because the United States and the EU and the collective West, they're setting their own traps. They are lighting their own fuses. And that fuse, it's like the Netanyahu bomb at the United Nations General Assembly. You've seen it, right? Where he's talking about Iran, and Iran's going to make these nuclear weapons, and it's these cartoon bombs. Well, it's kind of like that in real life. It's kind of like that the U.S. and the collective West are holding their own bombs in their hands, showing them to the world, then lighting the fuses and watching them blow up in their face. That's what's happening. And Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin said, well, this is a perfect time to strengthen our relations. We're going to do it anyway. So why not make this a historic moment? Why not show the world exactly where we stand? Why not take advantage of this opportunity to communicate not just to the global South? Because guess what, guys? Everyone, the global South is with Russia and China. You have people in the Central African Republic, in Mali, holding up the Russian flag and asking Wagner to replace French forces and various other Western military forces, saying, get out, we want Wagner. You have the Global South embracing China's integration initiatives. You have the majority of public opinion in the Global South saying, we want China to be our friend. We don't trust the United States. That is the mood in the world. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin know this. So this was such a genius diplomatic move to position themselves in this moment as the real leaders of the world, in that actually they can prove just by doing, right? There's two ways of learning. You can learn by reading and studying and watching the news and accumulating information, and then you can learn by doing. You can lead by example. There's different kinds of leadership. One of the biggest ones is leading by example. That's what Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin set out to do. And they were massively successful in this. Not only did they sign many agreements, not only did they promise to enhance their own bilateral cooperation, not only did they assert that they are the true leaders of the multipolar world, but they also were able to score a major diplomatic victory in a moment where diplomacy, if we take the lens of the collective West in the United States at its head into consideration, diplomacy is damn near dead at this point, because the United States and its vassals in the European Union have killed it in a lot of ways. They've done everything they can to destroy any semblance of what diplomacy means. But China, with its global security initiative, with its 12-point proposal for peace in Ukraine, Russia, with all of the ways in which Russia has maintained and developed ties globally, the same with China, the way that these two countries have conducted themselves by example have demonstrated already the points that were made from this meeting. But this meeting was a stamp. It really was a statement. It was saying that these two individuals, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, are in fact the leaders of the global South, the ascendant global South, which is the future of humanity, and that the collective West and its world order, dominated by the military-industrial complex and Wall Street and these neocon puppeteers, these unhinged warmongers, that they are a thing of the past. And that no matter what they do, they can kick and they can scream and they can reject everything that China and Russia propose and do and say. They can reject it all. It won't matter, because their societies, their systems will continue to crumble. And so Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin really did make a statement here. And just by meeting, just by taking the emphasis, right? Ukraine is such a huge focus right now, and it should be. Ukraine is a flashpoint for one of the most deadliest and dangerous conflicts that is emerging, right? This row that the United States is sparking and fueling with Russia and China. This is some of the most dangerous stuff geopolitically that has ever occurred, if not ever, given the fact that these countries are all nuclear armed, and that is the only way that these countries would be fighting, right? The only way the United States, I was telling a friend today, the only way the United States is going to fight Russia and China is nuclear weaponry. Because no matter what kind of advantages they have in this area or that area, Navy, Air Force, it doesn't matter. You try to fight a war with China, if the United States tries to do that, it will have to go nuclear, because there's no possibility. This isn't Vietnam, this isn't Afghanistan, this isn't Korea, but guess what? In all of those wars, the United States still couldn't get the job done despite their superiority. So lessons from history, right? Lessons from history tells us that a war with China, that the United States started one, it would be utterly mistaken and would likely lose. Russia, all the same. It can't even push Russia back in Donbass. Russia has been able to protect Donbass. It is making gains, and it's not even fighting its damned hardest. I mean, it is fighting a war of attrition. It has decided to do that strategically, but it isn't throwing everything into Donbass or into Ukraine. So the United States and NATO can't even push back on Russia there to the extent where it makes a significant difference in the overall trajectory of conflict. Do you think that a shooting war between between Russia and the United States would go better? No. So the United States in the collective West that it leads is in no position right now. And Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin said, well, we're in the position to lead the world. And that's what is so inspiring about this moment. This moment is about a shift in leadership. Multipolarity is here. These two leaders are not just demonstrating it in policy, but they're also demonstrating it diplomatically. They're saying game over, United States, game over, collective West. We are now strong enough. We are now independent enough. We are now able to economically integrate to the point of evading and escaping the impact of sanctions, militarily cooperate and develop to the point where any kind of war would be an absolute disastrous endeavor for the United States and the collective West, politically untouchable. The United States and the collective West can do nothing to the governments of Russia and China. There's no possible ability, no matter how much NED money, throw the NED, throw the NGOs, USAID, it doesn't matter. Throw all of it. They've thrown all of it at them, and it hasn't worked. Color revolutions, Hong Kong, right? It hasn't mattered. It hasn't mattered. The Chinese government, the Russian government, they only become more stable and only more legitimate the further and further the U.S. goes down the path of war. So that's what's so significant about this, is that you have politically, economically, militarily, these countries, Russia and China, are showing just how ironclad, steadfast, and strong they are in this movement toward a multipolar world.